I don't remember how soon after the review this happened, but sometime shortly after I did the Lion King review, I went to sleep one night with about 100 more subscribers than I had before I did the review, and when I woke up the next morning, I had over 1,000. And I said, shit. If I wasn't doing this with an audience in mind before, I sure as hell was now. As I said, I had planned to review a few of the Next Generation films next, but in light of all these new subscribers, I just figured that wasn't going to work anymore. I didn't think there was enough interest in those films, and since these reviews weren't just for me anymore, I decided to do something that people might find a little bit more entertaining. So the prequels it was. I had wanted to talk about these films since forever, and it seemed like a good starting point for all these new viewers. But as I say in the beginning of the review, this movie was the one in the trilogy that I had the least interest in reviewing. I have never found The Phantom Menace's badness to be that interesting to talk about. It's all just too obvious. I personally think it just kind of goes through the motions of bad. But I think of all the reviews I have ever done, the prequels were the most fun for me, and all the new viewers I had seemed to be on board with the character that I was presenting at long last. They all seemed to know when I was joking, they knew when I was exaggerating, but they also seemed to gain some insight about the film that they didn't see before. That made me feel really good. I felt like I had finally found a way to do this that blends entertainment with insight, and it seemed to be making people happy, and that was really cool. It also helps that I was talking about something that I was really passionate about. I had had an opinion about the prequels that had been honed in on for years at this point. I was 18 when The Phantom Menace came out, and as I say in the opening, I didn't get to see it at the premiere because I was sick. I was actually really sick. It was getting a little scary for me at the time. I remember that really well. But my brother and our friends all got to see it, and I'll never forget, when the movie was over, my brother called me from a payphone. That's how long ago this was. That's how old I am. He called me from a payphone. The words he said to me over that phone was the first feedback I would ever hear about The Phantom Menace. And those words were this: "You're not gonna believe it." At first, I took this as a ringing endorsement of the film, like, you're not gonna believe how amazing this was, until he went on to say, it was terrible. When I was in my early 20s, I had a D&D group, and we would all get together once a week and talk about various things around a game. And at the time, these movies were a big topic of conversation in our group. Some of the guys and gals in our group really loved the prequels, and others, like me and my brother, did not. A lot of the scripts for these prequel reviews were actually born out of some of those conversations. If I said something that got a laugh around the table, I figured maybe it would get a laugh here, or if there was a point I made in that conversation that sparked a round of interest, it would make it into the review. These reviews were also when I started using the line, "A wizard did it," which, as many of you know, is not my joke. That joke came from The Simpsons. I just figured everybody knew it came from The Simpsons, but this was in the days before memes, I guess, and I hadn't been doing this long enough to clarify things like, as they said on The Simpsons, or in the words of Lucy Lawless on The Simpsons, so unfortunately, people started attributing that joke to me, which was my mistake. You won't find "a wizard did it" returning to Confused Matthew in this new phase, because it's not my joke. But some of these jokes were mine. The funny nicknames that I gave some of the characters were fun. What the hell kind of Jedi are these went over pretty well, so, not bad. So I can pretty safely say that these prequels aren't getting a re-review. I don't have too many regrets about these. These reviews were just good fun, and hopefully insightful too. I guess the only thing that could qualify as a controversy around these were some of the details. In my opinion, the world building in these movies was just a mess, and I expressed that by asking a series of questions very quickly in the beginning, such as, why does a republic have a queen in it? Why is the republic trading with itself? Etc. That's the only thing I can really remember people having a problem with that wasn't just disagreeing with my opinions on the film. I remember I was getting really long comments and emails that were like, I'll tell you exactly why a republic has a queen in it, I'll tell you exactly why a republic is trading with itself. Now I'll freely admit that I'm not particularly savvy when it comes to those kinds of subjects in real life, so I'm perfectly willing to comp to any mistakes that I made in those areas, but I think that makes my point even more. If someone who doesn't know about those things tries to sit down and watch the film, they're going to be just lost. I just wanted to take all of those comments, put them in a letter to George Lucas, and say, make this the text scroll. Make this the dialogue that somebody says to somebody else. I sincerely believe that those people who left all the comments actually put more thought into those details than Lucas did, at least. at least they put more effort into trying to present a reader with those details than Lucas did presenting them in the film. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention this next thing. These reviews went over pretty well when they were released to my relatively small but growing circle of subscribers, and then things died down a little in the comments for a bit. But then a few years later, YouTube notified me of a surge in the comments. I wondered, what could this be about all of a sudden? So I scrolled through to find many a comment accusing me of ripping off the Plinkett reviews. That's how I discovered the Plinkett reviews. I don't actually care, but for the record, these came first. Honestly, aside from the fact that we both talk about the prequels, I don't see how these two different reviews are anything alike. I'm not even sure they really qualify as being in the same class. The Plinkett reviews were a full-on production. This is something I was doing in my spare time just for fun. I talk about things through the filter of a character, but I'm not a performer and not strictly an entertainer. Certainly not in the way that Plinkett is. I'm not even sure if we made any of the same points in our reviews. I mean, two people can talk about the same work without it being a ripoff. But if it satisfies the question that I have received many times since his reviews premiered, I thought the Red Letter Media prequel reviews were utterly fantastic. As for my reviews, they all began with this. Personally, after listening through this again, I'd say they held up pretty well over time. So I hope you like it, and here we go.
You know his words will get you farther than the film will ever go. Give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you what's wrong with the show. He knows what's good, what's bad, what's really bad. His face is just a sign. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
The day that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was released, I was really sick. My brother and all of our friends got to go see it on opening day, while I was stuck at home with a box of Kleenex next to my nightstand and a bucket on the floor for me to throw up in. As it happens, I had a better time than they did. Episode 1 is going to be a hard one to review for me, for many reasons. First off, so little happens in the film that it's going to be kind of like trying to review a film about a man who walked from one side of the street to the other side of the street. What can you really say about that? Second, it's going to be hard as hell to say anything about this film that hasn't already been said. This is why, with apologies to anyone who is looking forward to this, my review will contain no criticisms to the character Jar Jar Binks. What can I possibly say about this bull-ass crap of a character that hasn't already been said a million times already? If I had it my way, I would have started with episodes 2 and 3. Dear God, is there a lot to say about those messes. But I promised full reviews for all of the prequel films, and there is certainly enough wrong with this one to have a pretty substantive review, including a few problems that I can't believe anyone didn't notice. So is everybody ready? Here we go! The film opens to the following information. There is dispute over taxation to outlying star systems, and the Trade Federation is trying to resolve this by setting up a blockade of battleships to stop all shipping and trade with Naboo, so the Chancellor of the Republic has sent 2 Jedi to negotiate on the matter. Okay, so, what's the Trade Federation? Are they part of the Republic? What's Naboo? Is it part of the Republic? And if the answer to both these questions is yes, then why is the Republic trading with itself? How is it beneficial for the Republic to cut off trade with itself? Why does a republic have a queen in it? And what's more, what are the consequences if the trade routes are blocked off to Naboo? What are the Jedi negotiating about? And what will be the consequences if the negotiations fail? Also, the Jedi are part of the Republic. So again, if the answer to my first 2 questions is yes, then the Republic has sent the Republic to negotiate with the Republic about lifting trade sanctions on the Republic. This is the equivalent of a guy standing alone in a room and saying, "Shut up. No, you shut up. You shut up. You shut up." Also, if this whole thing is about tax violations on the part of the Naboo, you'd think the Republic would send tax collectors to resolve this, not the people who merely deliver the goods. And what the hell is a trade federation doing with a huge army in the first place? Unless it's the Republic's army, in which case they really are robbing Peter to pay Paul. Of course, it's also possible that the Trade Federation is not part of the Republic. But then, why the hell is the Trade Federation taxing Republic citizens? Wouldn't that be the job of the Republic? Why are they worried about breaking Republic laws if they're not part of the Republic? And why do they have a little floaty ship at the boring-as-hell Senate meeting? But all of these questions quickly become pretty meaningless, as when the Jedi are discovered, the Trade Federation immediately begin trying to kill them and landing ground troops on the planet. So, now I'm really confused. Are they trying to tax these people or kill them? And why the hell does a republic have a queen in it? Yeah, I know I already asked that, but I want to know, damn it! It doesn't make any goddamn sense! Maybe the rest of this film, or even the next two, will bear out better answers to these questions, or any answers at all, but for now, it seems to me that the only reason this conflict exists is because the Republic is just set up all stupid. So as I said, the negotiations about whatever all go south, and both Jedi stow away in one of the ships and escape from whatever they're doing. They end up on Naboo, and then they meet Jar Jar Binks, which, if they use their last ounce of force concentration, they might be able to understand a single word he's saying. He tells them about a super-secret Gungan city that nobody knows about, and the two Jedi convince him to take them there. But when we finally see this thing, first of all, it's about the size of Delaware, and second of all, it's brighter than the sun. And considering all three of them were able to swim there without either dying of exhaustion or being crushed under the water pressure, it's obviously not that deep. Which means at nightfall, the surface of the water is going to be lit up brighter than Vegas. They may as well have hung a neon sign over the water that says, "This way to the secret Gungan city." Nice super secret city you got there, guys. So the three of them approach the Gungan leader and ask for a ship. He gives it to them, and they go to the city where the queen is to try and rescue her. Now, as you can see, that took about 2 seconds for me to summarize, but we have to watch this play out for 10 full minutes. And most of that is just watching them drive a boat around in the water. Not only is this boring and tedious, not only does it not move the plot along at all, or introduce us to any of the characters in any way but superficially, but it's also completely unmenacing, as Lucas is never able to convince us that these people are in any real danger throughout the trip. So they swim, 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 swim. Then finally, they reach the city and rescue the queen. They manage to escape with a ship, but it's damaged in an attack, which forces them to land on the planet Tatooine. Now, here's a really short description of Tatooine. It's boring, uninteresting, and has nothing to do with anything that's going on Naboo or in this movie. But don't worry, I'm sure they won't be down there for long. So they end up on the planet and begin looking around for a part they need for their ship. It's there that they meet Watto, who, if they use all their force concentration, they might be able to understand a word he's saying. Then we're introduced to little Anakin Skywalker. Qui Gonn Jinn goes with Watto to look at some of the parts, and as soon as he's out of the room, Anakin asks Queen Ubaduba if she's an angel. When she asks what he's talking about, he says he heard space pilots talking about angels. They're supposed to be the most beautiful creatures in the universe, and they're supposed to live on the moons of Vago. Ubaduba responds to this by asking, "How do you know so much?" He just asked if you were an angel, and he thinks angels live on the moon. He doesn't know anything. Anakin begins telling her how he's been a pilot all his life. The conversation then steers into the fact that he's also been a slave all his life. So, I'm confused. Is he a slave or a pilot? How does it make sense that he's both? Anyway, Watto and Qui Gonn begin discussing parts when Watto tells him that the Republic credits are no good on Tatooine. Qui Gonn discusses what they have to barter with Obi-Wan, but he tells him that they don't have anything in the amount they need. So Qui Gonn says, "Oh well, I'm sure something will just come along and get us off of this planet." I'm serious. That's his solution. Just wait around for something to happen. How about reveal yourself as a Jedi and tell Watto that if he gives up the part, you'll come back with twice what it's worth, and if he doesn't, you'll be really, really mad. Nah, then they wouldn't be able to force the stupid storyline they need. So then a sandstorm whips up, and Anakin invites Qui Gonn, Ubaduba, and Jar Jar to his house for shelter. And then we enter into the realm of the retarded. First, we learn that Anakin built C-3PO, which has no relevance to anything and was written in purely for a fan service. But even more than this, Anakin explains that 3PO is a protocol droid and that he built it to help his mom. Yeah, 'cause that's what his slave mom needs the most right now. A protocol droid. Look, Mom, I built you this droid. He can't help with the chores or any of the back-breaking slave labor you have to do, but if you never need help with any protocols, I guess he can do that. But this isn't the worst of it, by a long shot. We also later learn that there's a device they put in the body of slaves that will blow up if they try to escape, and so Anakin built a scanner to try and find it. And later we learn that Anakin built a pod racer, an entire fully functioning pod racer, without Watto's knowledge. So I want to explain to you what the movie has just told us. Free people who came to this planet were not able to buy one part of a ship with money. But a child slave was able to build a protocol droid, and a scanning device, and a pod racer. So where did he get the parts? And where did he get the time? I'm a working class citizen who can't even afford video editing software, and sometimes I find myself so busy that I don't even have time to do these reviews. If a slave on Tatooine has both the time and the resources to build 3 complicated pieces of hardware, machinery, and equipment, sign me up for that. Welcome to part 2. I don't want to give you the impression that the only problem I have with this film is its plot holes, though they are both numerous and a clear indication that Lucas isn't thinking about what he's writing. This is boring stuff. From the underexplained stakes and organizations in the beginning of the film, to the wooden and undeveloped characters throughout, Lucas is totally unable to tell a story in this film. The only thing he can deliver for us is special effects and uninteresting and unhelpful exposition. Special effects are on screen, characters have famous names from past films, and that's enough for him. It is not enough for me. We've already seen what a mess the organizations and motivations are in the film, so let's talk about the characters. Half of them are just dicking around in the background, and the other half may as well be a stump that's carried around. This unfortunately includes McGregor as Obi-Wan, which is painful for me to say because I'm a big fan of his work. But here, he just doesn't deliver anything more than an average Alec Guinness impression. The only character in the film that stands out in any way is Qui Gonn. Here, there is actually an effort being put forth by Liam Neeson to add a subtle touch of depth to the character, which we will especially see towards the end of the film. I liked Qui Gonn, I just wish they would have put him in a better film, because even he isn't saving this one. Then we have Anakin, and here we have the ultimate flaw in the conception of this screenplay. The writers need little Anakin to be an oppressed slave, but also a builder of things, and a dreamer, and love-struck, and a mama's boy, and a genius. The problem with that is, 1, that's too many things for this kid to be, so they all need to be rushed, which doesn't give us any time to know the kid. 2, half those things are incompatible with one another given the setting, and 3, this kid doesn't come across as any one of those things. He's just a generic mop-top little boy who is whatever the plot requires him to be at any given moment. And the rest of the characters are barely worth mentioning. So everyone gathers around the slave mom's table, and they all discuss Tatooine's slave problem. Ubaduba comments that slaves are a violation of the Republic's slavery laws when Anakin's mom cuts in, telling her that the Republic doesn't exist on Tatooine. You'd think that this would generate some kind of reaction from Qui Gonn, but no, he just sits there stone-faced and has more to say about pod racing than he does the slaves that are suffering on this planet. So, it's really nice to know that the guardians of truth and justice in the galaxy don't care about slavery. I mean, the Republic doesn't exist out here? Why the hell not? Why don't the Jedi send a huge relief effort to the one place in the galaxy that needs them the most? Especially considering that rescuing all the slaves would be an easy task for them. All they have to do is use their force power to turn the explodey things off in their bodies and start moving them off the planet. But then, I suppose I can understand why they wouldn't. After all, there are only adult and child slaves who are suffering here. The Jedi have way more important things to worry about than that, like tax disputes. What the hell kind of Jedi are these? Guardians of Truth and Justice, my ass. So Anakin eventually figures out that Qui Gonn is a Jedi, and he asks if he's come to free the slaves, but Qui Gonn tells him no. Anakin replies, "I think you have. Why else would you be here?" Anakin, if you think the Jedi in these prequel films are going to do anything useful or good, God, are you in for a shock. Qui Gonn eventually spills the beans that they're trying to get back to Coruscant, but their ship was damaged. Anakin offers to fix it, but Qui Gonn says they must first acquire the part they need. But they have nothing to trade with, so Anakin then offers for them to gamble the part away from Watto by betting on him in a pod race, which compounds the problem once again of the plot holes we saw in Part 1. Now there is no chance that Anakin is stealing the parts to make C-3PO or the scanner or the racer. If he could steal those parts, why not just steal the part they need? Meanwhile, the Trade Federation tells Black Cloak Guy that Queen Uba Duba ran the blockade. He orders him to find her, but the Viceroy says that it's impossible to locate the ship. Cloak Guy then responds, "Not for a Sith." Then we see Darth Timefiller for the first time doing what he and every character in this film does best, and period. Standing around in the background. So, what the hell is a Sith? When I heard him say it for the first time, I thought it was a rank, but then later on in this film, we hear the Sith have been extinct for hundreds of years. So then I thought it was a race. But later on in these films, we learn that Senator Palmolive is also a Sith, and he's obviously not the same race as Spiky Head. So what the hell are they? I was also under the impression that Darth Timefiller was a mute until I heard him say the one and only line in the film. "At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have our revenge." Revenge for what? Who are you? We won't find out any answers to these questions in this film, but don't worry, I'm sure they'll explain them all in the next two. Meanwhile, Qui Gonn tries to get to know Anakin a little better by taking a sample of his blood. He sticks a device in his arm and sends the data to Obi-Wan and asks him to analyze the sample. This is yet another case of Lucas dropping things into the film when he needs them to be there without having it make any sense. I mean, did Qui Gonn take that blood sampler with him to the negotiations, or does he just carry it around with him wherever he goes? So Obi-Wan analyzes the sample and finds that Anakin's metachlorian count is off the charts. I wonder what a metachlorian is. I'll bet it's something really good that enhances and reinforces the spiritual elements of the Force. So Qui Gonn makes the deal with Watto. If Anakin wins the race, Watto gets to keep all the winnings minus the part he needs, and if he loses, Watto gets their ship. Qui Gonn informs Obi-Wan of the plan, and then he mentions that he has a strange feeling about the boy. Nah, too easy. He talks about this with Anakin's mom, and quickly identifies Anakin as someone who is strong in the Force. So then he asks who the father is, and the mother explains that there was no father. She just woke up one day and was pregnant with him. Lucas, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing? You're throwing Immaculate Conception into this now? For what? What does this add to Anakin's character? Nothing. What relevance will this have to the rest of the film? None. Stop pulling things out of your ass that have no payoff. So Qui Gonn goes to Watto and ups the stakes on the race. He tells him that he'll wager his pod in exchange for Anakin and his mother. Watto then tells him that a pod isn't worth 2 slaves by a long shot, so Qui Gonn just offers the pod against the boy. So you didn't give 2 craps about these poor suffering slaves when they weren't of any value to you, but now that you've identified one that you want, you'll try to get him off the planet. Nice. Real nice. What the hell kind of Jedi are these? Guardians of Truth and Justice, my ass. The deal is made, and then we get to the race. The 10-minute long, boring as hell, may as well fast forward it, race. But you know, now I can see why Lucas didn't use the time he had to put a good story together or develop any of the characters, because we really needed to watch this. Anakin wins the race and they get the part. There, I just saved you 10 minutes of nothing. And come to think of it, when we tally up the 10 minutes of swimming around in the water, the journey to the Gungan city that we didn't need to watch, and this coma of a racing scene, we realize that Episode 1 isn't even a movie at all. What it is a 2-hour-long special effects demo reel. Who gives a shit? So Qui Gonn tells Anakin that he is now free and offers for him to come with them. Anakin gets very excited when all of a sudden he asks if his mom will be going as well. Qui Gonn informs him that he did everything he could to free his mom, but he just couldn't do it. So unfortunately, Anakin is now being forced to be separated from his mother. So they get to their ship when all of a sudden they're attacked by Darth Timefiller. He fights with Qui Gonn for a while until Qui Gonn eventually jumps aboard the ship, and they all get away. So long, Tatooine. We weren't able to help you this time, but don't worry, I'm sure they'll come back and free all the slaves in the next 2 films. Welcome to Part 3, and it's here that we finally learn what the Metachlorians are. They're microscopic life forms that live inside their cells, without which they would have no knowledge of the Force. The Metachlorians have a symbiotic relationship with those who possess them and speak to them, whispering the will of the Force. When I saw Star Trek Generations for the first time, saw Guinan's ghost or something, and heard all the fairy tale music in the background, I said, okay, so I guess the Nexus isn't a scientific phenomenon, it's magic. Great. Just great. This bullshit storyline actually gives me the opposite problem. Now the Force is not a spiritual phenomenon, it's science. Great. Just great. Lucas, you could not have undermined the whole point of the Force any more than this. This puts who a great Jedi is and who isn't in the realm of natural selection rather than spirituality. If you're born with lots of Metachlorians, you're great. If not, then it doesn't matter what you do. You'll never be as good as anyone that has a higher count. And this sums up one of my ultimate problems about these insanities of prequel films, where in the original films, a great Jedi was judged by who these people are. In these films, a great Jedi is judged only by what they can do, which is gratuitous because they all seem to be doing exactly the same stuff. But now I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So everyone goes back to Coruscant, and Queen Ubaduba begins talking with Senator Peppertee, while the Jedi go to report the Sith and the boy. The Senator tells Ubaduba that he doesn't have any confidence in the Chancellor sending Republic forces to intervene on the Trade Federation, but a special session will take place in the Senate so they can hear her case. Peppertee suggests that the Queen cast a vote of no confidence against the Chancellor, but the Queen hesitates because the Chancellor is one of Naboo's strongest supporters. Meanwhile, the Jedi report that they think there's a Sith on Naboo, and all the Jedi discuss this as if we're supposed to know what that is. Finally, Qui Gonn brings up the boy. He says he has the highest Metachlorian count in recorded history, lucky him, and he believes he may have been conceived by the Metachlorians. Not the Force, the Metachlorians. Oh, okay, then never mind. I guess there was no Immaculate Conception. I guess his mom was just some woman the Metachlorians had sex with to produce Anakin. So the Jedi then assume that Qui Gonn is talking about the prophecy of the one who will restore balance to the Force, and they assume that he thinks the boy is the person in this prophecy. Interesting, considering Obi-Wan never mentioned a prophecy, Yoda never mentioned a prophecy, Darth Vader never mentioned a prophecy, the Emperor never mentioned a prophecy. It's almost as if the whole prophecy thing wasn't in the original films and is now being pulled out of Lucas's ass with no payoff. Nah, I'm sure it just slipped all their minds. Meanwhile, they hold the boring-as-hell Senate meeting, and Ubaduba reports the Trade Federation's occupying force that's killing her people. She asks for immediate intervention, but then the Trade Federation chimes in, saying that she hasn't presented any actual evidence that an occupying force is taking place. So the Chancellor says the best he can do is send a commission team to Naboo to verify her claim. And what does Ubaduba say to this? Does she say, no need, let's bring in the 2 Jedi to testify? The ones who the Trade Federation tried to kill, who saw the occupying force firsthand, and who personally saved me from that occupying force? Does she say that? No. She just does what the plot needs her to do and casts a vote of no confidence. And why is she bothering with that? At this point, I'd go back and sign the damn thing, show it to the Chancellor, and say, see, they forced me to sign a treaty saying their occupying force is legitimate, so obviously there really is an occupying force there. Then I'd have the treaty declared null and void as it was obviously signed under duress and pain of death, and I'd have these 2 jokers arrested. Unless the Republic is set up so stupid that they don't even have political safeguards against these kinds of tactics, in which case, any idiot could take these people over. So Queen Ubaduba does what's required of her, turns off her brain, and casts a vote of no confidence. Senator Pantene then whispers in her ear, now they will elect a new chancellor. A strong chancellor. What, after one vote? One vote from one representative of one planet is all it takes to get an entirely new chancellor elected immediately? Could the Republic be set up any more stupid? It's almost as if it were designed specifically for the Emperor to take it over. And what's worse is that later in the film, Ubaduba decides to go back to Naboo and let her fate be the same as the fate of her people. Well, if you were just gonna go back anyway, why didn't you just let the Commission go with you? It would have taken just as much time, and at least you could have thrown the Chancellor his bone and got some forces behind you. This is a clear example of a common theme throughout these prequel films. In order to force the stupid storylines he needs, Lucas has to make all of his characters stupid. No one with half a brain would proceed this way. Meanwhile, Anakin is brought before the Jedi and does some impressive mind tricks for them. Qui Gonn then asks if they're satisfied and if Anakin can be trained as a Jedi. After mulling it over for a while, the Jedi decide not to train the boy because he's too old to start training. He's 8. What, do the Jedi start training when they're fetuses? Hoya! Hoya! So Qui Gonn says, well, I'll train him then. I'll take him as my apprentice. Oh, what's that you say? I already have an apprentice? Oh, well, I want this one now, so Obi-Wan's fine. Yeah, he can be a full Jedi now, sure. He's more than ready. Gee, thanks, dude. So after discarding Obi-Wan like an old shoe when he finds a better apprentice, the Jedi then say that they don't have time for this. The Republic is electing a new Chancellor, and Queen Ubaduba is on her way to certain doom. But of course, they're Jedi in the prequel films, so they don't give two shits about any of that. They just want another crack at the guy who looks like a cross between a Goomba from the Super Mario movie and the world's dorkiest football fan. And seeing as how the planet is crawling with an occupying army and a certainly dangerous adversary, they naturally decide to send only 2 Jedi. Brilliant. So they all go back to Naboo, and then 3 things happen. First, they get the Gungan army on their side and have them start a battle as a distraction while Ubaduba tries to capture the 2 Trade Federation bozos. We also learned that the one dressed up as the Queen was just a decoy and that Ubaduba was actually masquerading as the handmaiden the whole time. Yeah, whatever, who cares. Second, the Naboo pilots take back their attack fighters and try to blow up the space stations orbiting Naboo, which will shut down all the attack droids, because I guess it never occurred to anyone to give them independent power sources. This is difficult because they cannot seem to penetrate the station's shielding. Third, the 2 Jedi go after Darth Timefiller, and Anakin is told by Qui Gonn to stay inside the cockpit of one of the attack fighters where it's safe. Wouldn't it have been safer just to leave him on Coruscant? What the hell did you even bring him for? So the 2 Jedi encounter Darth Timefiller, who has a double-bladed lightsaber, which I guess is supposed to compensate for the fact that he doesn't have a character. Honestly, is this all Star Wars fans care about anymore? If Lucas had put 2 more saber beams on the top and bottom of that thing, his ticket sales probably would have doubled. So then the 3 eat up some more screen time by having a fight in which nothing at all is at stake. But I do have to say, as far as fight scenes go, this one was pretty good. It's the only fight in the prequel trilogies that doesn't look so obviously choreographed that it looks like they're dancing with one another. But what the hell is up with this shield thingy turning on and off? Why is this even here? Anyway, Darth Timefiller kills Qui Gonn and then sets his sights on Obi-Wan. These 2 fight for a while until Obi-Wan is knocked into a pit. He hangs there for a while until yanking Qui Gonn's saber to him, leaping out of the pit, over Darth Timefiller, and slashing him in 2. All this as Darth Timefiller stands there with his guard down and just stares at him while this happens. Again, when the plot needs the characters to be careless and stupid, they're careless and stupid. Meanwhile, Anakin is fiddling with the controls in the fighter and accidentally puts it on autopilot, which causes it to accidentally start flying towards the space stations. Insert generic little kid having fun adventure sounds here. Whee! Whoa! Whoa! He eventually flies into one of the stations, which makes you wonder how this was even possible considering the whole problem they were having was penetrating the shields. Anyway, once he's in there, he accidentally blows the thing up from the inside and escapes. It's the one good thing this character will ever do in these films, and it was a complete accident. Lastly, all the droids fighting the Gungans shut down, and the Queen and her forces capture the Trade Federation guy. Senator Pubba comes to congratulate her and reports that he has now become Chancellor thanks to her one vote. So Obi-Wan takes Anakin to be his apprentice, everyone celebrates, and the Emperor can now begin spinning his web around these complete morons. Now we see that evil will always triumph, because good is done.